Welcome back, mystery lovers. MsStoryMystery here. Tonight, we're diving headfirst into the eerie, the unexplainable, and the downright chilling. From haunted houses to a stalker in the night, these stories will leave you questioning what's lurking just beyond the veil. Before we get started, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss a new upload. Now, grab your coziest blanket, dim the lights, and let's explore the darker side of the unknown. I don't remember everything about this experience, mostly just the emotions, the fear, the dread, but the physical events are more like fragmented memories, bits and pieces my friend reminded me of later. She'd bring up things I told her back then, things I didn't even want to remember. I've always experienced supernatural stuff to some degree, but this was different. This felt darker. Honestly, it felt demonic. It didn't happen all at once. My mom and I had just moved into this tiny house surrounded by trailers. At first, it was subtle, just a sense of being watched. You know that feeling, right? Like eyes are on you, but when you look, there's nothing there. At the time, it was new to me, so I brushed it off. I told myself I was imagining it. But the feeling never went away. If anything, it grew stronger. After a while, that unease turned into something much worse. It was like this heavy, suffocating dread. Like whatever it was wanted to hurt me, and it enjoyed watching me squirm. I couldn't sleep. I'd lie there, every light in my room blazing, but it didn't help. I could still feel it, watching. Always watching. Then came the nightmares. They were vivid and terrifying, the kind that jolt you awake in a cold sweat. Around this time, everything in my life was already overwhelming. My last year of college, a stressful job, it felt like too much. I tried convincing myself it was just the stress getting to me. My friends said the same thing. But deep down, I knew better. This wasn't stress. This was something else. Being alone in that house became unbearable. I couldn't do it. If I was by myself, I'd either call someone to come over or beg friends to stay on the phone with me. I felt like a prisoner in my own home. I even started doing cleanses, burning sage, whatever I could think of. But they only seemed to make things worse. Whatever this thing was, it got angrier, more aggressive. Even my friend started to take me seriously. She began giving me little charms and objects to ward off evil. Now here's where it gets even creepier. There are things I don't remember saying or doing, but my friend swears I told her these things on the phone. She said I talked about hearing footsteps pacing outside my bedroom door when I was home alone. She reminded me of the times I'd call her in a panic, saying the door was shaking like something was trying to get in. And the worst, seeing something in the shadows, crouched, watching me, something that wasn't human. This went on until we moved. Just 6 trailers down, mind you. But as soon as we left that house, everything stopped. The nightmares, gone. The dread, the fear, the feeling of being watched, gone. For the first time in what felt like forever, I could sleep. No lights, no disturbances, nothing. It was like flipping a switch. I convinced myself it really was just stress, a coincidence. Until my mom had a conversation that shook me to my core. One day, a maintenance man approached her. He explained that his sister's family had moved into our old house and they were struggling. He told my mom, "My nephew's staying in the same room your daughter did. Did she ever experience anything? Supernatural, I mean? Because he's being tormented. He can't sleep at night." When my mom told me that, my stomach dropped. She laughed it off and said, "No, she never mentioned anything." But I knew. I knew. It wasn't just me. Whatever had been in that house, it was real, and it stayed behind. To this day, I don't exactly know what it was. I've dealt with plenty of supernatural experiences, but this was the first time I felt like something truly wanted to harm me. I hope I never experience anything like that again. Ever. I've always been a skeptic when it comes to ghosts, but there's one story, one chilling family tale, that always seems to center around me. Despite the events, I remain doubtful. After all, I was only 6 years old at the time, and my memories are hazy at best. Still, my family insists on its truth. This is the story of House 404. It all began when my mom and stepdad moved in together, bringing my brother and me to a new home. During the house tour, the realtor made a strange comment. The roses taped to the wall shouldn't be removed. Even as a kid, I found it weird. My stepdad, though, thought nothing of it. Shortly after we moved in, he ripped the roses off the walls. That's when things started happening. The first incident came on a quiet afternoon. I had just come home from school, alone. I curled up on the couch and turned on my favorite movie, Snow Buddies. At first, everything seemed normal. Then, a strange feeling crept over me. A heavy, unsettling sense that I wasn't alone. The room felt colder. Upstairs, in my brother's bedroom, the only room on the top floor, I heard pacing. Slow, deliberate footsteps moving back and forth. The sound stopped the moment my brother got home. It wasn't just me. My aunt and uncle who stayed in the basement often heard footsteps above them when no one else was home. My aunt, a die-hard skeptic, once called my mom in a panic after hearing what she described as someone walking back and forth. It wasn't long before they moved out. Even our dog Bear, the big, brave Australian Shepherd mix, seemed affected. He refused to go upstairs and would growl at my brother's bedroom door, the same place where we'd heard pacing. At night, Bear planted himself outside my door, standing guard. Then there was the incident in the basement. My brother, his friend, and I decided to play hide and seek. I hid behind the washer while the others found spots under the futon and behind the TV speaker. When my brother found his friend, the boy was pale, trembling, and on the verge of tears. After the game, he finally admitted why. He'd seen footprints appear in the carpet and heard a woman's whisper right next to his ear. As if that wasn't enough, the boys noticed writing on the concrete wall near my hiding spot. It was scrawled in what looked like red chalk, and it read, These roses shall not be removed. They keep her spirit at bay. If they fall, all will pay. After that, my brother's friend swore he'd never return to our house, and he didn't. The most terrifying event happened one night while I was asleep. My stepdad's cousin was sitting in the living room, which had a clear view of my bedroom. My room, meant to be an office, had a glass door. The cousin noticed movement inside my room and called my parents. Together, they watched in stunned horror as my blanket was lifted once, twice, 3 times before being yanked to the floor. My stepdad rushed in and picked me up. He didn't sleep for nights after that. He stayed on the couch, keeping watch over my room, while Bear kept vigil outside my door. We moved out a week later. Years later, I did some digging into the house's history and found something shocking. A newlywed couple had lived there. In just days after the wedding, the man killed his wife and then hung himself in my brother's room. Her body was found in a sealed crawl space, also in my brother's room. The roses taped to the walls, they were from their wedding. Based on what was scrawled on the basement wall, it seems the roses were meant to keep her spirit at bay. Removing them unleashed her? My family believes she targeted me because at the time of her death, she'd been pregnant. Unable to have the child she longed for, she lashed out at the child living in her home, me. Even now, as someone who doesn't believe in ghosts, I try to explain it all away. Maybe I kicked the blanket off myself. The footsteps could have been the house settling. The dog's behavior, maybe he sensed an animal in the crawl space. And that writing, likely the ramblings of a delusional man. But my stepdad hates talking about it. He says it's the only thing in his life that's truly scared him. Maybe it's because whatever it was, it seemed to fixate on me. So what do you think? Was it just a series of coincidences? Or was it something more? This happened to me about 6 years ago. Back then, walking was a big part of my routine. I loved it. It was my time to clear my head, get my steps in, and just be. Most days, I'd head out late morning or early afternoon, strolling through town and then making my way back home. Pretty predictable, right? But on this particular day, things didn't go as planned. I had a ton of errands to knock out first, so by the time I was free, it was already creeping into the mid-afternoon. I remember checking the clock, almost 3 p.m. I debated skipping my walk altogether. There's always tomorrow, I thought. But then I decided, why not? I'd just cut it short and be back before sunset. Easy enough. So I threw on my walking gear and headed out. Fast forward almost 3 hours and I realized I'd lost track of time. When I checked my phone, it was just shy of 6 p.m. and the sun was gone. Nothing but a faint orange glow fading into the cold night sky. That's when I knew I'd screwed up. I was still 6 miles from home, and the temperature was dropping fast. I picked up the pace, eager to get home. I figured once I hit the 2-mile mark, I'd be in the clear, and for a while I was. Until I wasn't. I passed by a convenience store and noticed a man sitting off to the side, smoking a cigarette. He looked to be in his early to mid-30s, dressed in all black, hoodie, pants, shoes. The whole vibe screamed, "Don't make eye contact." And yet, out of the corner of my eye, I saw him glance my way. He didn't just glance, though. He stared. Blankly. It was unnerving, but I brushed it off and kept moving. A few moments later, something told me to glance back, and that's when I saw him. He was up now, walking in the same direction as me. I kept looking over my shoulder, hoping he'd turn off down another street, but he didn't. He stayed behind me. A few minutes in, he started yelling. "Hey!" he shouted. I ignored him. Then, louder, more aggressive. "What the fuck?" That's when my heart started pounding. I quickened my pace, keeping my eyes forward. I texted my dad. "There's this guy following me. He's yelling at me. I'm freaked out." His reply came quick. "How far are you from home?" I told him, "Less than a mile." "Keep walking," he said. "Don't stop. I'm coming to get you." I felt a sliver of relief, but it didn't last long. When I glanced back again, the man was still there, silent now, but still following me. I debated running the rest of the way home, but the thought of him knowing where I lived stopped me cold. When I got to my street, I hesitated. Something, call it instinct, intuition, whatever, told me not to turn. Instead, I texted my dad. "I passed the street, come the other way." He replied with a simple, "Okay." I kept walking, trying to stay calm. That's when I heard it, a frantic, scuffling noise behind me. I turned around and my stomach dropped. He'd pulled his hood up and was sprinting straight towards me. I didn't think, I just ran. My legs felt like they were on autopilot, and the world around me blurred as I bolted across the street. My lungs burned, my heart hammered, and still I ran. I don't know how long I was running. Seconds felt like hours when I saw it. Headlights. A car was coming. Desperately, I waved my arms, praying they'd see me. They did. The car stopped, and as I got closer, I realized it was my dad. Relief flooded through me, but I couldn't stop running until I reached the car. I yanked the door open, jumped in, and slammed it shut. I looked back, expecting to see the man right behind me, but he wasn't there. He'd vanished. I told my dad everything as we drove. He insisted on circling the area to look for the guy, but the streets were empty. No shadows, no movement, no sign of anyone. That night changed me. I never go out walking after 2 p.m. anymore, and I never, ever leave the house without a pocket knife. I don't know what would have happened if that man had caught me, and honestly, I don't ever want to find out. When my family planned a trip to Florida, I was absolutely thrilled. Beaches, theme parks, and family time? Count me in. But the best part, my best friend Emily was coming with us. Our families were super close, practically like one big family, so we couldn't wait to experience it all together. Florida was everything we dreamed it would be. The sun was warm, the palm trees swayed gently in the breeze, and the days felt endless with excitement. We spent hours exploring theme parks, splashing in the pool, and eating way too much ice cream. At night, we'd stay up late in our cozy little rental house, talking about everything from crushes to creepy ghost stories. It felt like the perfect trip. But then came the third night, a night Emily would never forget. It was late and the house was quiet except for the faint hum of the air conditioner. We had finally decided to call it a night after another round of giggles and whispered secrets. Sometime around 2:30 a.m., Emily got up to use the bathroom. I was already half asleep, curled up under the covers, so I barely registered her leaving the room. When she came back, though, something stopped her in her tracks. I was standing in the middle of the hallway, just outside the bathroom door. Or at least, she thought it was me. The light from the bathroom cast a faint glow, and she could clearly see me staring at her. I didn't say a word. I didn't blink. I just stood there, my eyes locked on hers. She froze. "What are you doing?" she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. No response, just silence and that unblinking stare. Her chest tightened, and a wave of unease washed over her. She quickly brushed past me, not daring to look back. As she hurried back into our shared room, her heart was racing, her mind desperately trying to make sense of what she'd just seen. But when she climbed back into bed, her stomach dropped. I was there, sound asleep under the covers, exactly where I'd been when she left. She didn't sleep for the rest of the night. The next morning, she told me everything. At first, I laughed, thinking she was just messing with me. But when I saw the look in her eyes, wide, serious, and filled with fear, I stopped. "I swear it was you," she said, her voice shaking. "You were just standing there, staring at me, but you couldn't have been." I had no memory of getting out of bed. None. The idea of sleepwalking crossed my mind, but the way she described it made my skin crawl. "You weren't acting like you," she said. "You just stood there. It didn't feel right." Nothing else strange happened for the rest of the trip, but that moment lingered. For Emily, it was a chilling memory she couldn't shake. For me, it became one of those unexplainable things I'd replay in my mind, wondering what really happened. Whether it was sleepwalking, a trick of the light, or something else entirely, we'll never know. But even now, years later, Emily swears by what she saw that night. And honestly, the thought of me standing there, staring in the dead of night, still sends a shiver down my spine. I used to live in an apartment complex that had seen better days. It was built sometime in the 70s or 80s and used to be a premier property, but over the years its shine faded. The complex had a mix of residents and sat on land with a heavy history. It was once Native American territory and had been the site of conflicts and even deaths. During my time there, I lived in 2 different apartments within the same building. My first place was on the 2nd floor near the management office. It wasn't terrible, well, except for the mouse problem. Things took a turn when I spotted a roach, and that was it for me. I told management I was ready to move. They offered me a corner unit on the 3rd floor, all the way at the other end of the building. It had some new furnishings and, best of all, no roaches. I was thrilled since I'd always wanted a top-floor corner unit, fewer neighbors, and no footsteps from above. Or so I thought. At first, the new apartment felt perfect. It was quiet, the mice weren't as bad, and I was happy. But not for long. My partner, now my wife, and I started noticing something strange. Footsteps. Every day, without fail, we hear someone walking above us. Except we were on the top floor. There was no one above us. At first, we brushed it off. Maybe it was noise carrying from somewhere else. But the pattern was too specific. Whenever we moved from the bedroom to the living room, the footsteps followed. At night, as we got into bed, we'd hear them enter the room, pacing in circles in one corner before settling. When we'd hang out in the living room, the same thing would happen. Pacing, then stillness, always in a corner of the room. It was unsettling. I tried to come up with logical explanations. Maybe there was someone in the attic space above us. But why would they follow our movements? If I were hiding in an attic, I'd be quiet, not stomping around. And the sound wasn't coming from below. It was definitely above us. Eventually, I had to face the possibility that the apartment might be haunted. Now, my partner comes from a spiritual background and firmly believes in spirits, but she avoids engaging with them unless she feels threatened. Me? I'm the opposite. I'm fascinated by the paranormal. I've studied it, almost became a priest, and even considered exorcism work before choosing family life. People have told me I have the gift of discernment, seeing truths, glimpses of the past or future, and even remote viewing. But that's a story for another day. This entity, though, I could sense it clearly. In my mind's eye, I saw a man in his mid to late 20s. He had a scruffy beard, wore a flannel shirt and jeans, and looked disheveled. Here's the creepy part. He wasn't walking on the floor. He was on the ceiling. He'd pace in circles and then sit cross-legged, staring silently at us as we went about our lives. One night, things escalated. My partner had gone home for the evening, and I was alone in bed, just starting to drift off, when I felt it. The bed was shaking. At first, I thought it was a passing train. We could occasionally feel one from miles away, but there was no train that night. I adjusted my position, thinking maybe it was a pinched nerve or something. But when I lay flat on my back, the bed started shaking harder. That's when I got concerned. I'm no stranger to the paranormal, but this was new. I said the Our Father prayer, hoping it would help. The shaking slowed down, but didn't stop immediately. It carried on for about 30 more seconds before finally subsiding. I called my partner to tell her what had happened. She agreed to come over, but told me she'd had her own strange experience that night. When she'd gotten home, she found her bedroom door locked, which wasn't unusual, but when she went to unlock it, the door wouldn't budge. She pushed and pulled with all her strength, but the handle wouldn't turn. Frustrated, she called her grandmother for help. Her grandmother, who's spiritually powerful, gave the handle a forceful twist and shoved the door open. It finally gave way, but it was strange, and the timing of it all was too coincidental. When my partner arrived, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. Whatever had been shaking the bed or lurking in the apartment stayed quiet that night. But I never forgot those footsteps or the feeling of being watched. And that wraps up this spine-chilling episode of MsStoryMystery. If you enjoyed the ride into the unknown, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you are always the first to know when a new story drops. Share this episode with your fellow mystery lovers. And if you have your own tale of the eerie or unexplained, send it my way. I'd love to feature it. Thanks for watching. And until next time, stay curious and stay spooky.